There is a peculiar stillness to fog when it is dense enough to feel like cloth. Soft, damp, and oddly intimate. It does not merely drift in Victorian London. It settles. It clings. It folds itself around chimneys and coal carts, around lampposts and lamplighter's, around every living and unliving thing until the city seems to exist not in a place, but in a pocket of breath. You arrive in the midst of such a fog, not on a sunlit morning, not to the chime of bells or the cheer of children, but into this curious velvet murk sometime just after dawn. The steamer that carried you up the Thames now fades into the distance, no more than a whisper of shadow and creaking wood. The ropes are unmoored. The pier is slick. London stands ahead like a memory someone else had. Your feet, clad in travel-worn leather, press against cobbles that glisten with river moisture and soot. There is the scent of salt, but also of something more domestic: coal smoke and horse sweat, cabbage and wet wool. You wonder distantly if the entire city is brewing something foul in an invisible cauldron. But then again, there is music in it too. The city hums in tones you've not heard elsewhere. Hooves echo like metronomes. Steam whistles from unseen carts. Somewhere a woman sings, not for joy but for coin, and her voice, though raspy, cuts clearly through the fog. You are not the only arrival. Around you, men and women stumble from the vessel like travelers from a dream. A boy, no older than 10, yells something about luggage while holding out a hand already blackened by coal dust. Another offers to guide you to a proper lodging, though his grin is too wide and his shoes too loose. You pass them all, politely. Something within tells you to move forward without assistance, to let the city introduce itself without intermediaries. So, it does. The streets you wander, perhaps Dock Street, perhaps not. No signs are visible, curve like lazy serpents. Buildings lean toward one another as if whispering secrets above your head. Gas lamps flicker. Despite it being day, they're yellow, flames struggling like tired candle wicks. You feel the fog in your ears, your nostrils, the collar of your coat. It carries sounds to you with eerie clarity. A cough from 2 alleys away, the slap of laundry against stone, the sudden shriek of a door's hinges opening in protest. It makes the world both small and infinite. You stop at the corner of a narrow lane, more of a suggestion than a street. An old woman, wrapped in shawls that seem knitted from the fog itself, sells newspapers from a crate turned sideways. Standard or Chronicle, love. Got both, and murders in either. You shake your head, though smile. Already the city is offering you its preoccupations: crime, commerce, and the daily battle of ink versus silence. Further along, a man pushes a cart laden with jellied eels, the smell bold and defiant. Behind him, a street musician plays a wheezing accordion with a rhythm better suited to funerals than dances. A dog of no discernible breed and too thin for winter follows them both with dignified loyalty. This is not a London of polished boots and ivory canes, though those exist somewhere behind frosted carriage windows. This is the other London, the surviving one. You begin to notice things. A girl standing barefoot on a threshold, brushing her hair with fingers that tremble. A priest locking the doors of a church with too much haste. A lamplighter pausing to rest one hand against a post, eyes closed as if remembering something. These people do not seem hurried, but they do seem weathered, as if each has been rubbed down by time until only their essential self remains. No one speaks to you unless spoken to. You are a curiosity, but not remarkable. Eventually, you find the boarding house your letter mentioned, a red brick establishment in Bloomsbury, whose windows droop slightly and whose door is painted the sort of green that once hoped to be cheerful. A sign above the entrance reads, Miss Heddle's Lodgings, Clean Rooms, Honest Beds. Miss Heddle herself answers your knock. She is a woman of formidable height and formidable silence, who eyes your suitcase and your accent with equal suspicion. She speaks very little, only enough to direct you up the stairs, 3 flights creaking all the way, to a room that seems smaller than the fog outside. There is a bed, neatly made, a basin, recently emptied, a single window, its latch broken. and a wardrobe large enough to hold secrets but too shallow for coats. You place your belongings down with reverence as if the floor might reject them. You sit and you listen. Outside, the sounds continue. Distant laughter, a shouted name, a wagon rumbling by. A clock chimes noon with reluctance. Someone somewhere is singing again, a different voice now, male, softer, as if singing to a ghost. You think, so this is London. But what you really mean is, so this is how life will feel for a while. Not fast, not loud, but dense, strange and fog-bound, like a novel whose first page you've just turned, and already the characters seem to know you. That evening, you dine on bread, broth, and boiled carrots, generous, considering the price. You ask Miss Heddle whether the fog will lift soon. It never quite does, she replies, more to herself than to you. You thank her anyway. Back in your room, you write a letter to no one. It begins, "Dear friend, today I arrived in a city that does not quite believe in mornings." You describe the dog, the girl, the flower seller, the fog. You do not describe your fears, not of getting lost, but of being forgotten in a place too vast to notice your presence. The letter goes unsent. You tuck it into the wardrobe. And then, as the coal fire settles into embers and your eyelids weigh with travel and impression, you hear it. The city's lullaby. Not music, not words, but the slow, irregular pulse of a place alive, breathing, just beneath your floorboards. You smile, not because you understand it, but because you are here. And that, for now, is enough. If you are still with me, nestled beneath your blankets and listening as sleep tiptoes nearer, then let us take another stroll. This time through the mind-bending, boot-scraping, nerve-soothing labyrinth that is the street plan of Victorian London. You might think as a newcomer that the challenge of navigation lies in the fog or the sheer size of the place. But no, the real difficulty lies in the peculiar, almost stubborn way that London refuses to be understood. She is a city designed not for logic, but for mystery. You could, quite sincerely, walk 3 miles in one direction and still be on Church Street, and not a soul would consider this strange. There are over 30 George Streets, at least a dozen King's Roads, 1 Fleet Street, but many rivers. Maps exist, yes, but they are more like suggestions than rules. And as for signage, well, if you can find a street sign at all, it is likely nailed unevenly to a leaning wall or carved into a stone so weathered it could just as easily say Peppermint Lane or Peril Road. So what is a gentle soul to do? You begin, as many do, with the sound of hooves. The clatter of hansom cabs can guide you toward the main arteries, Oxford Street, Regent Street, the Strand. Follow their rhythm like a distant heartbeat. But beware, for these streets have no patience. Their carriages cut corners like blades, and pedestrians are left to their own reflexes. Crossing a street here is not an act of travel, it is an act of faith. You might then attempt to orient yourself by landmarks. Ah, the clock tower, you say. That must be Big Ben. But you are wrong. It is one of the city's many minor timepieces ticking away on a church whose name escapes you. The true Big Ben is often cloaked in fog and rarely rings when expected. This too is the London way. Everything familiar is just slightly out of reach. In time, you will come to embrace the confusion. You will begin to find joy in getting lost, to see each misstep as an invitation rather than a failure. You may set out for Covent Garden and end up in Limehouse, having passed 4 entirely different types of bakeries, and at least 1 goat standing inexplicably in a pub doorway. But there are tools. Some Londoners carry miniature compasses on their watch chains, an affectation as much as an aid. Others swear by scent. The smell of vinegar means you're near the pickle works, and that's just west of Clerkenwell, one might say, entirely seriously. Still others employ the most ancient of techniques, asking directions. This is where the real charm begins. Ask a butcher and he will wave vaguely with his cleaver saying, "Just past the turn, then second left. No, third. If you see the orange cat, you've gone too far." Ask a lamplighter. and he may light your way, if he likes your coat or your boots or the way you pronounce Holborn. Ask a child, and you will get the fastest answer, often for a halfpenny, and occasionally for free if they suspect you are interesting enough to follow. One elderly man, who spends his days selling walnuts from a cart near Piccadilly, claims he has never been lost in his entire life. This is impressive until you learn he has never left the same 3 streets. Too many choices out there, he says with a wink. Better the devil you know. You will also learn the unofficial signals of the city. If the pavements are thick with horse dung, you're near a stable or a wealthy home. If the air smells sharply of ink, printers are nearby. Fleet Street. Perhaps if you hear drunken singing at midday, you've found a tavern that serves workers, or artists, which in London are often indistinguishable. But let us not forget the river. The Thames, winding brown and broad through the heart of the city, is the oldest compass of all. It does not concern itself with fog or fashion. It flows like memory. Learn its curve, its bridges, its moods, and you will never be truly lost. Still, despite all efforts, you will lose your way. Everyone does. The postman, the priest, even the Queen's own carriage on occasion. But this is not failure. It is tradition. To be lost in London is to be baptized by the city. It means you are now part of its rhythm. One day, you will find yourself in an alley you do not remember entering, standing between a chimney sweep's apprentice and a pile of fish heads. And just as panic begins to stir, you will glance to your left and see a flower shop you've passed before. You will recognize the crooked doorframe, the cat asleep in the window. You will know at last where you are. And in that moment, you will feel something strange. Not relief, not quite, but kinship. As if London, with all her soot and secrets, has whispered, "You may stay." You will begin to leave a trail, not of breadcrumbs, but of memories. The bench where you saw a man knit socks with a pipe in his mouth. The window with lace curtains that never change. The smell of roast chestnuts that always appears near dusk. These are your true map, invisible to all but you. So worry not if you wander. In Victorian London, the shortest distance between 2 points is rarely a straight line. It is instead a story, winding and peculiar, filled with puddles, paw prints, and whispered warnings. And as the day wanes and fog returns, you'll find your way home, boots a little heavier, mind a little lighter. The city has not conquered you, nor have you conquered it, but together you have come to an understanding. Now sleep. Tomorrow we ride an omnibus. Mornings in Victorian London begin not with the light, but with the sound. Light is rare, often hidden behind a veil of fog thick enough to dull the sun's sharpest rays. But sound? Ah, that is a certainty. Before your eyes even open, your ears are already working. The soft groan of wooden beams above you, the steady clip-clop of hooves echoing from the street below, the faint, mournful hoot of a river barge as it sighs its way down the Thames. And then there is the kettle. Its whistle begins as a suggestion, then builds with quiet determination until it is the undeniable herald of the day. In your small boarding room, its arrival means Miss Heddle is already downstairs, stoking the range, boiling water with an efficiency that neither fog nor frost can challenge. You rise slowly, not with urgency, but with the practiced rhythm of someone who knows the city will not run without you but won't wait either. Your fingers are stiff, the air is cool, and your boots never seem where you left them. But you dress nonetheless. Shirt, vest, a cravat tied not too tight, and the jacket with the least dust. Downstairs, the hallway smells of old wood and damp cloth, but also, wonderfully, of toast. The breakfast room is a long, narrow space with mismatched chairs and a table set with the hopeful orderliness of routine. The wallpaper is faded, patterned with climbing roses that seem forever out of season. A single window lets in light that is more suggestion than illumination. Already seated are 2 other lodgers. Mr. Treble, a retired librarian who smells faintly of lavender and ink, and Miss Fry, a piano teacher with unflinching posture and a fondness for marmalade. They greet you with nods, not words. In London, the morning is not for conversation. It is for preservation. Breakfast arrives in 3 parts: a thick slice of toast, a modest slab of cold butter, and tea strong enough to unmake regrets. Occasionally, a poached egg appears if Miss Heddle is feeling generous or guilty. Today, there is also porridge, steaming and pale, offered without comment. It is not fine dining, but it is anchoring. You eat slowly, listening to the world take shape beyond the walls. The city outside is already in motion. Street vendors call their wares in voices sharpened by chill. Hot pies, ink and paper, whelks and vinegar. A cart rolls by, its wooden wheels grumbling over cobblestones. Somewhere a church bell chimes a slightly inaccurate hour. It doesn't matter. London's true time is kept by the flow of feet. Miss Fry folds her napkin with precision and departs. Mr. Treble lingers over his tea, rereading yesterday's illustrated London news as if the print might change its mind. You watch them with quiet fondness. There is something comforting in the rituals of strangers. Your own cup of tea is nearly empty. You swirl the dregs and catch a glimpse of your reflection, pale, thoughtful, and only just awake. Outside, the fog has begun to lift, not fully, but enough to reveal outlines: the arch of the garden gate, the shadow of a chimney, the silhouette of a cat watching with ancient indifference. Now is the time to step into the day. You retrieve your hat from the stand in the hallway. It never quite fits, but it is yours. The door groans as you open it. The cold rushes in like an eager child. The street is waiting. Mornings in the city are not tranquil. They are not serene. But they are steady. There is comfort in their predictability. An omnibus rolls past, drawn by 2 horses, its roof already crowded with passengers who prefer the view, or who cannot afford the fare below. The conductor shouts destinations, barely pausing for breath. A flower seller arranges her wares on a cloth laid across the pavement, violets and primroses bundled like secrets. A chimney sweep, soot-faced and cheerful, whistles a tune as he disappears into a narrow stairwell. Behind him, a woman balances a basket of laundry on her hip, her face set with determination. Everyone has somewhere to be, and no one has time to explain why. But amidst this gentle chaos, there is a rhythm, a pattern. London does not rush, it flows, you walk with it. Past the bakery with its ever-burning ovens, past the bookseller whose windows fog from the inside, past the bootblack's stand, where 3 boys argue about politics with the confidence of men twice their size. At the corner, you pause for a moment to admire a horse, a magnificent creature, black as soot, muscles rippling beneath a polished harness. Its breath puffs in white clouds. Its driver tips his cap. You nod in return. Further on, the scent of coffee wafts from a newly opened cafe. It is a rare treat, foreign and slightly decadent. Inside, gentlemen read French newspapers, and a woman in a green hat drinks from a porcelain cup with the air of someone who expects to be noticed. You do not enter. You are content to walk. For this is what mornings in Victorian London are about. Not speed, not urgency, but presence. It is about being a part of the moving tapestry, even if only as a single thread. The fog is thinner now. The city is visible, if not yet clear. You know your destination, but it can wait. For now, the simple act of walking, of noticing, of listening, is purpose enough. You pass a child chasing a hoop with a stick, his laughter echoing. You pass a lamplighter returning home, coat damp from dew. You pass the bakery again and consider briefly a second breakfast. And somewhere behind you, the kettle is already being washed. Another morning has begun. Another story unfolds. The first thing to know about riding an omnibus in Victorian London is that it is not an act of travel. It is an act of coordination, negotiation, and endurance, carried out with a remarkable lack of complaint. There are no reservations, no polite queues with tidy signage. What you get instead is a controlled scrum. You hear the clatter long before you see the omnibus, hooves against cobblestone, the driver's whip cracking like punctuation, and the iron-rimmed wheels humming over the road with the tired authority of a street that's known too many wheels. The vehicle pulls up, boxy, wooden, painted in fading reds and greens with the name of its destination written in gold leaf now dulled by soot. It resembles a traveling chest with windows, a rolling room with strangers in it. The roof is ringed by a thin railing where braver souls climb up for the cheaper fare and the fuller view. You hesitate only slightly before stepping aboard. Tatu, interior greets you not with grandeur but with warmth, and the unmistakable scent of damp coats, shoe polish, and old newsprint. The benches run along the sides, facing each other, and you take the last space not occupied by hat, parcel, or handbag. It is a snug fit. To your left, a governess, young and tired, keeps a firm grip on her umbrella, and an even firmer eye on the child next to her, whose boots have clearly been introduced to every puddle between here and Paddington. Across from you, an older man reads a pamphlet upside down, though whether out of poor eyesight or sheer distraction is unclear. There is no conductor inside. He rides on the back, occasionally leaning through the door to shout the name of the next stop in a voice that sounds like a broomstick dragged across gravel. Holborn Viaduct, Ludgate Hill, all out for Fleet. The omnibus lurches forward. It does not roll, it stumbles, it complains. Its joints creak in protest with every turn, and its wheels interpret cobblestones as a challenge. Yet somehow, miraculously, it moves, and so do you. The city passes by in narrow slices. A butcher's stall with crimson meat displayed like theater. A trio of chimney sweeps practicing cartwheels. A bookseller stacking volumes faster than customers can browse. At one corner, a man preaches fervently to no audience, arms raised to a sky too fogged to notice. Inside the omnibus, no one speaks unless necessary. This is not rudeness. It is urban courtesy. A recognition that in close quarters, silence is the kindest gift. Conversations are conducted in raised eyebrows and slight tilts of the head. The child stares at you, wide-eyed and curious. You smile, and in return, he sticks out his tongue before hiding behind his governess's skirts. She does not notice. She is reading a letter, lips moving faintly as her eyes scan the page. You feel the turn before you see it. The whole vehicle leans like a ship in heavy wind. The older man clutches his pamphlet with renewed devotion. Someone's parcel slides under the bench, trailing twine and newspaper like breadcrumbs, then a sudden halt. The horses stomp impatiently. Outside, two men argue over something unseen, perhaps a fare, perhaps a dent in a wheelbarrow. The conductor leans in. Change horses at the next. Finsbury bound stays on. The omnibus continues. The ride is not smooth, but it is steady. You find yourself swaying with its rhythm, learning its pauses and judders like a dance. Each jolt becomes less jarring, each corner more familiar. Through the small window you glimpse St. Paul's Cathedral emerging from the fog like a ship's prow, solemn, immense, and somehow reassuring. People come and go. A woman boards with a hat so wide it deserves its own seat. She nods curtly and adjusts her skirt to avoid brushing against the knees of a startled gentleman who quickly finds the view out the window deeply fascinating. You notice the social orchestra, in motion, how eyes avoid meeting, how hands clutch parcels in a silent pact of space sharing. A man in a bowler hat coughs, and instantly three others shift subtly away, as if choreography had been rehearsed. The omnibus turns again, this time onto a broader avenue. You glimpse the facade of the Royal Courts of Justice, gothic and brooding, its windows dark with the weight of deliberation. A newspaper boy runs beside the vehicle briefly, shouting headlines you cannot quite hear. His hat bounces with every step. Next stop, Temple Bar. The conductor's voice again, this time louder, as if proud. A few passengers stand, ducking awkwardly beneath the low ceiling as they prepare to disembark. You slide your knees aside, politely, allowing one to pass. He nods, a gesture of thanks distilled to its barest form. The omnibus feels emptier now. You stretch your legs slightly and realize, with mild surprise, that you are rather enjoying this, for all its rattles and clanks, its lurches and leaks. The omnibus is a kind of sanctuary. It is where the city's layers sit together, briefly and unremarkably. Ladies with errands, clerks with ledgers, widows with memories. All moving, all enduring, all making their way. The child, now more confident, dares another glance. You offer a small wave. This time he smiles before returning to the solemn business of inspecting his boots. The driver calls out sharply, and the horses slow. A final curve, and then a familiar building comes into view. Your stop. You gather your coat, nod once more to the strangers who shared your journey, and step down onto the street. The omnibus rattles away behind you, part of a city that never truly stops. You walk on, the echoes of wheels fading into the morning air. And for the first time since your arrival, you realize something. You are not just surviving London, you are moving with it. London, for all its gas lamps and gilded drawing rooms, is not held aloft by its finery. It is propped up, day and night, by quieter hands, scrubbing, sweeping, boiling, stitching. Hands that vanish when the carriages arrive and return only when the chandeliers go dim. Today we walk not through the halls of Parliament or along the polished floors of Mayfair, but through the narrow spaces between, where the servants and street folk live, move, and endure. If you wake early enough, earlier even than the milkman, you might catch the first movement of a city not yet dressed for company. In the courtyards behind grand townhouses, kitchen doors swing open to reveal harried figures in aprons and shawls. Domestic servants, maids, scullery girls, and footmen begin their day in silence. There is no time for chatter. Coal must be fetched, ashes swept, bread proofed, fireplaces laid. Most began their service in their teens, some even younger. Some were born in country cottages and sent to London for better fortunes, or at least for regular meals. Others arrived by necessity, fleeing poor harvests or poor fathers. For many, the city is both employer and jailer. Take, for instance, Mary Ellen, just 17 and already a veteran of 3 households. She lives in a narrow cot beneath the stairs and rises with the crows. Her first task each day is to light the fire in the drawing room, careful not to leave ash on the rugs. She wears shoes with thin soles and keeps her hair tied in a tight plait, though wisps always escape. Mary Ellen knows her employer's breakfast preferences better than her own. She has seen Lady Hargrave weep into her teacup when she thought no one watched. She has heard secrets through doors never meant to be listened through. Yet she is paid not to know, paid not to speak. Her wages, 7 shillings a month, disappear, in ribbons for her sister's hair and the occasional candied plum. Then there are the boys, the errand lads and boot polishers, page boys and coal carriers. They grow wiry from lifting, quick from dodging. Many have never been to school. Some sleep in the kitchens they serve, curled near the range. Others sleep in stables or not at all. But it is not all bleakness. In back alleys and yard spaces, servants share whispered jokes while peeling potatoes. They trade bits of newspaper for stories, buttons for bread. They write letters home in ink borrowed from their employers, using scraps of paper meant for grocery lists. They dance occasionally, when no one's looking. Outside the homes another army wakes. The street folk, vendors, beggars, rag pickers, costermongers. The city would collapse without their noise. A costermonger is easy to spot, pushing a wooden cart painted in bright colors, hawking fruit with a song-like chant that bends vowels into performance. Strawberries sweet, pennies neat. Some wear aprons patched so many times they resemble quilted maps. Their trade is half sales, half showmanship. Among them walks Ezra, an apple seller with a voice that could part fog. He stations himself near Ludgate Hill, where foot traffic is rich and tourists soft-hearted. He knows which apples to offer to which faces, sour for the bankers, sweet for the nurses, bruised ones half-price for the children. Ezra shares his corner with Nellie, who sells handkerchiefs she embroiders at night. Her fingers are nimble, though twisted from cold. She never begs, only offers. A stitch of softness in a hard world, she says, laying one neatly folded square upon her cloth-covered crate. Not far off, young boys pick through ash bins and gutters for bits of metal and bone. They are bone grubbers, soot finders, rag, and bottle lads. What they collect is sold by the ounce to dealers who in turn sell to factories. It is a cycle of usefulness drawn from waste. Nothing is lost in London, not even the lost. And then, of course, the crossing sweepers. Small children, brooms in hand, who clear paths across filth-slicked roads for a penny. They bow with exaggerated grace. They smile with teeth too young for such enterprise. Most are orphans, some runaways. They work in pairs sometimes for safety or company. Their lives are precarious, but they too find joy. They share crusts with alley cats. They race the carriages when no one is looking. One boy named Toby keeps a tally of every gentleman who tips his hat. He says when he reaches 50, he'll buy a pair of gloves and go to the opera. He is at 37. It is easy, from a distance, to paint these lives only in shadow. But closer you see the threads of color. A maid with violets tucked behind her ear. A butcher's boy who whistles Mozart. A street seller reciting poetry to pigeons. They are not invisible to each other. The servant knows the flower girl's name. The bootblack brings pastries to the old woman who sleeps in the church doorway. They trade kindness like currency. They build quietly their own city beneath the city. As you walk among them as an observer wrapped in coat and curiosity, you feel the quiet weight of their presence. It is not a story of misery. It is a story of rhythm, of grit and grace, of waking each day into a world that barely sees you and making a life in spite of it. So when you next see a servant lad balancing a tea tray, or a girl sweeping mud from a shop front, look twice. There is history in that glance. Dignity, unspoken, and undefeated. London's foundations are not stone or steel. They are human. They are humming still. Feeding London is no small task. It is a city of mouths, millions of them, chewing, sipping, slurping, biting. From dock workers to duchesses, from chimney sweeps to chess-playing clerks, every soul must eat. And Victorian London, with all her soot and steam, obliges in ways both magnificent and mundane. You begin your exploration, fittingly, with a sniff. It drifts toward you on a breeze laced with fish scales, bread crust, roasted chestnuts, and, somehow, boiled tripe. It is a scent not unpleasant but puzzling. It carries you like a thread through winding lanes until you reach the great belly of the beast, the market. There are many markets in London, each with its own flavor and clientele. Smithfield trades in meat, and it does so loudly, bloodily, and with the blunt efficiency of generations. Billingsgate sings of fish, the wet slap of cod, the silver gleam of herring, the stink of eels escaping their buckets. Covent Garden offers something gentler, fruit, flowers, conversation. But today, we walk into Borough Market, nestled near the river. Here, iron arches shade the stalls, and the rhythm of buying and selling is a kind of music. Traders shout not to insult, but to court. Shoppers argue not in anger, but in performance. Fresh mutton, still bleedin'. 3 apples for a tuppence, the third one's lucky. Haven't seen beef this red since the Queen's cheeks. You navigate the maze with curiosity and care. A butcher holds up a pig's head with theatrical pride. A baker cuts samples of oatcake with a knife the size of a small sword. A dairy woman slaps butter onto wax paper and tells you it's from a cow named Gertrude who listens to organ music. Some vendors offer fare meant for the tables of the well-off. Game birds, fine. Cheeses, imported olives. Others sell to the everyday hunger of the masses. Hot pies, wrinkled apples, penny loaves dense enough to stop bullets. For every silk-gloved lady choosing a goose, there's a ragged boy sneaking a plum when backs are turned. You buy a bit of everything out of politeness, curiosity, and a growing hunger. A small pork pie still warm, a crusty heel of bread, pickled onions, and a twist of paper. You eat as you walk, like many do, savoring the chewiness of London's appetite. Food here is not always glamorous, but it is constant. It is creative. It is comforting. In boarding houses like Miss Heddle's, the meals are modest but regular. Porridge in the morning, stew in the evening, bread, always bread. On Sundays, if luck is kind, there might be roast beef or sweet pudding, and the dining room smells better than the church incense. In the homes of the wealthy, breakfast might include kippers, eggs toast with marmalade from Seville, and the sort of tea that arrives in tins with foreign lettering. Dinners are formal affairs with multiple courses: turtle soup, pigeon pie, blancmange that quivers with more pride than flavor. Servants rehearse the order of forks. But on the streets, food is democracy. Vendors feed the city in motion. Chestnut. Sellers roast their wares over coals in brass pans, handing out brown paper packets with fingers blackened by smoke. Pie men carry trays suspended from straps around their necks, offering savory meat in flaking crust, warmth and sustenance for a penny or two. Hot eel stands flourish near docks, the broth salty and thick. Even those with little find a way to taste. A mother may buy a single onion and stretch it across a week's worth of meals. A boy might chew licorice root as both sweet and entertainment. Soup kitchens, some charitable, others entrepreneurial, dole out meals of questionable content but undeniable comfort. You pass a man boiling potatoes in a drum on a street corner, his ladle never still. His apron reads, "Penny a scoop, laughter free." You try some. The potatoes are watery, the salt uneven, but it is hot, and he tells a joke as he serves it. You laugh despite yourself. There are, of course, the absurdities. Victorians are obsessed with digestive health. Advertisements for Dr. Bramble's curative biscuits and Nanny Finch's tummy drops decorate every available wall. There is a restaurant in Holborn that sells nothing but clear broth, claiming it cleanses the soul. A man in Piccadilly is rumored to eat nothing but turnips and insists it makes him invisible to mosquitoes. Menus, when they exist, often confuse. What is collared calf's head? Do you dare try jugged hare? And is bubble and squeak meant to describe the dish or the aftermath? Yet for all its strangeness, food in Victorian London binds people together. Meals are shared, traded, whispered about. Recipes pass between servants like secrets. A good pudding earns loyalty. A bad stew earns mutiny. One evening at Miss Heddle's, a surprise arrives. Treacle tart, baked by her niece. The tenants, normally silent, murmur approval. Mr. Treble requests seconds. Miss Fry, stern and unyielding, smiles into her napkin. It is a small moment, but a true one. Food is, after all, memory you can taste. Later, walking home past shuttered shops and sleeping carts, you smell cinnamon drifting from a bakery that never truly closes. The scent follows you, settles into your coat, and stays with you as you drift into sleep. In a city so vast, so fast, food is how you hold a piece of it in your hands, and sometimes, if you're lucky, in your heart. In Victorian London, your clothes introduce you before your name ever does. Before a word is spoken, before your footsteps even echo down the cobblestones, your attire has already begun a conversation. It whispers to passers-by where you belong, where you might be going, and where you are absolutely not allowed to enter. To dress in London is not simply to clothe oneself. It is to prepare for the stage, whether you are cast as lady or lad, maid or merchant, scholar or scoundrel. Fabric is the first sentence in the story others will write about you, and so every morning dressing is a ceremony. You begin with the basics. If you are a gentleman, that means linen, clean, starched and white if you can afford it. Shirts are long and tucked, their collars turned up stiffly like declarations of moral intent. Over this comes the waistcoat, buttoned with precision. It may be wool, it may be velvet, but it must be proper. The trousers follow, high-waisted, snug, and never ever without suspenders. Belts in this era are still the stuff of rusticity. Then the coat. Morning coats, frock coats, lounge coats, each designed for a particular time of day or degree of ambition. Tailcoats are reserved for evening, and to wear one at breakfast is to risk mockery or mystery. Finally, the cravat, tied in a knot that suggests confidence or at least dexterity, and the hat, without which no man is complete. If you are a lady, the ritual is even more intricate. Dressing requires time, assistance, and a tolerance for laces, stays, and fastenings in improbable places. Corsets are pulled tight, not merely to shape the waist, but to shape perception. A proper silhouette is a virtue made visible. Next come the petticoats, layer upon rustling layer, followed by the skirt, the bodice, the shawl, perhaps a bonnet if the weather requires it. Gloves are never optional outdoors. They are protection and propriety in one. Jewelry, if worn, is subtle unless it is meant to be a statement, and statements in Victorian society are rarely whispered. But not everyone has such choices. For the servant girl, clothing is dictated by uniform. Drab, durable, and always in service of someone else's comfort. A housemaid might wear a gray wool dress with an apron and cap. A nursemaid, blue cotton with darker trim. These are not garments of individuality. They are roles stitched into fabric. Even within the working class, dress tells stories. A butcher's apron is striped and stained with labor. A clerk's jacket may be threadbare but neatly brushed. A chimney sweep wears soot like a second skin, his trousers patched at the knees. For many, Sunday is the only day they wear color. A chior, borrowed waistcoat, a ribbon in the hair, shoes polished not just for church but for dignity. On the street, clothing is a map of the city itself. Silk bustles brush against burlap sacks. A top hat nods politely to a flat cap. The wealthier Londoners glide while the poorer ones weave. Everyone knows their place, even if they dream of another. Shops, of course, abound. There are establishments like Swan and Edgar, where the middle and upper classes can browse ready-made garments or have their measurements taken with solemn gravity. Tailors and dressmakers abound, some skilled enough to serve nobility, others specializing in mending rather than making. And then there are the pawnbrokers. For many Londoners, clothing is cyclical. A coat may be worn Monday to Friday, pawned, on Saturday to pay for food, and retrieved again by Tuesday. This is understood, accepted, and rarely spoken of. In Whitechapel, Petticoat Lane buzzes with the chatter of textile trade. Here you might find lace from France, Indian cotton, remnants from aristocratic wardrobes smuggled into second-hand stalls. Everything is negotiable. Everything has a story. And then there's disguise. Victorian London is a place of double lives. A lady might dress as a maid to escape a dull engagement. A thief might don a vicar's robe to avoid the law. Actors parade as paupers, and paupers mimic poets. Clothing becomes costume, becomes camouflage. One man, known only as Feathers, roams the streets in elaborate outfits of his own design. Part soldier, part dandy, all imagination. He is greeted with laughter, respect, and the occasional coin. No one knows where he lives. Some say he's a fallen noble, others a tailor with too much fabric and not enough clients. But everyone agrees, Feathers makes the city more bearable. Clothing also signals mourning. Victorians grieve in black, deep, layered, unmistakable. A widow may wear black for 2 years, gradually lightening to gray or lilac as time passes. Even children wear mourning ribbons. Shops sell entire wardrobes for the bereaved, and etiquette books dictate exactly how long each relation should be mourned. But perhaps most fascinating is the way Londoners of all classes take pride in appearance. Even the poorest make an effort. A flower pinned to a lapel. A cap brushed clean. A shawl draped just so. It is not vanity. It is resistance. In a world where survival is a struggle, dignity is worn like armor. And so, as you walk through the fog-laced streets, observe the fabrics around you. They are more than fashion. They are flags, stories, shields. The girl with the mended hem may be saving for something better. The man with scuffed boots once danced at Vauxhall. The old woman in 3 shawls owns only 2 but borrows warmth from memory. In Victorian London, to dress is to declare, I am here, I endure, I choose to be seen, even if only by those who know how to look. There are cities made for riding, places where horses, carriages, and clattering wheels write the melody of movement. But London, despite her omnibuses and cabs, is not one of them. She is, and always has been, a city of footsteps. To walk in, London is not merely to travel, it is to witness, and to be witnessed. It is how one learns, remembers, and, when necessary, disappears. Every Londoner, no matter how fine or frayed their coat, is a walker by necessity or design. The wealthy stroll in measured lines through Hyde Park, parasols tilted, conversation drifting like perfume. The poor march from job to job, ankle-deep in puddles and determination. Clerks pace the Strand on their lunch break. Lovers linger in lanes no wider than whispers, and some, like you, walk simply to understand. Your boots strike the pavement, with a steady rhythm, click, tap, scrape, joined by the irregular percussion of thousands more. It is a morning like most, gray, a touch damp, and utterly alive. The streets are always in motion, not the violent rush of chaos, but the steady ripple of purpose. Londoners do not dawdle. They move with intent, even if that intent is merely to be somewhere else. Children chase hoops. Apprentices run errands with parcels tucked under arms. Policemen glide with stoic pace, eyes scanning alleys. Old men hobble to benches already claimed by pigeons. Walking is not just transport, it is choreography, and you are part of the dance. You weave through carts and carriages, between chimney smoke and shopkeepers' sweeping steps. You pass a woman arguing with a cabbage seller, her voice slicing through the fog. You pass a man with shoes wrapped in newspaper, his coat held together with twine. You pass laughter, silence, song. Walking reveals what carriages obscure. You see the shop signs, painted, carved, sometimes spelled wrong. Boot and Son, Dr. Bly's Tonic Emporium, Madame Virtue's corsets. You see the faces behind glass, tailors hunched over thread, bakers brushing crumbs from trays, a dog asleep atop a pile of onions. You see lives, a street preacher in Whitechapel stands on a crate and declares judgment upon sinners. A few feet away, two flower girls giggle behind their gloves. No one listens, but no one interrupts. Even sermons have their rhythm here. You cross bridges, real and metaphorical. The Thames rolls beneath you, carrying barges and secrets alike. Walking across the river changes the sound of the city. On one bank, bells. On the other, hammers. The air shifts just slightly, scented by tar and tide. You stop for a moment at the center of Southwark Bridge. The city stretches out in layers, domes, spires, chimneys, clouds. Your breath curls before you, visible, momentary, a reminder that you too are part of this great machinery, however quietly. Walk long enough and the city begins to speak. It tells you which alleys hold kindness and which doorways are best avoided after dusk. It teaches you to read footprints in the mud, heavy ones from a coalman, light ones from a dancing girl. It shows you which windows flicker first with lamplight, which ones never darken. In London, to walk is to belong, even if only for an afternoon. There is something meditative in it. Step after step, thought loosens, worries soften. The body moves and the mind floats. Ideas arrive like pigeons, uninvited, but familiar. You remember things as you walk. A smell from childhood, a phrase in a letter, a tune played in a tavern, long ago. Sometimes you follow others without meaning to. A man with a limp in a violin case, a woman humming a lullaby, a child dragging a stick along railings. You match their pace for a while, then drift apart. No words exchanged, but something shared. A moment of synchronous wandering. London encourages such encounters. It is a city of corners and surprises. You turn down a passage lined with shuttered windows and emerge into a square you've never seen. There, a brass band rehearses beneath a soot-darkened statue. The tune is off, but the effort is honest. An old couple sits nearby, sharing a paper cone of sugared almonds. This is what walking gives you. Unscheduled joy, no timetable, no destination, just the slow unfolding of a city not designed to be rushed. London is best understood in fragments, in the rhythm of steps, the tilt of roofs, the sudden flare of light between clouds. And when you tire, there are benches tucked in mews, doorsteps that welcome a pause. There is always a pie stall, a flask of tea, a stranger with a story. You rest, your legs not to stop but to listen better. You may find yourself walking in circles. Many do. The city loops and twists, loses its edges. But the joy is not in arrival, it is in the being. There is a reason why poets walk, why philosophers pace, why children skip when no one is watching. Movement creates space in the mind. And, in a city as dense as London, that space is golden. Even as dusk settles, the walk does not end. The gas lamps bloom one by one. The fog returns, curling gently around ankles. And still the streets thrum with motion. You return home by foot as so many do. Your boots are heavier, your thoughts lighter. You carry with you impressions, a scent, a sound, a stranger's smile. The pavement knows your tread now, and somewhere beneath your feet, London remembers. There is a peculiar kind of intimacy in overhearing, not the deliberate prying sort, the kind that presses ear to keyhole and digs for scandal. No, what we speak of now is gentler, a passive kind of listening, where the city tells its stories, not through events but through the snippets of dialogue it releases like autumn leaves on a breeze. Victorian London, for all her crowds and chaos, is a whispering city. You hear it first in the fog. Sounds here do not crash, they glide. They fold over themselves like silk. And when you walk the streets, when you ride the omnibus or linger at market stalls, you cannot help but overhear. It is not intrusion. It is immersion. Your day might begin with voices carried through the floorboards of a boarding house. Did you hear about Miss Little? Ran off with a footman, they say. Imagine that for someone who irons collars. Not the tall one. No, the one with the eyes, like wet marbles. Teacups clink. A chair creaks, then silence, brief and knowing. Later you pass a flower stall near a railway station. Two women lean close, ostensibly inspecting violets. But their conversation is elsewhere. I told him. I did. You bring me home with empty hands one more time, and I'll sell your boots while you sleep. Did you mean it? Of course not. But I put them by the door just the same. Laughter. The sound of petals brushing fabric. You walk on, but the exchange lingers. In London, voices are everywhere, layered like sediment. In a pie shop off Drury Lane, two students debate Hamlet with the intensity of philosophers, their fingers stained with ink and gravy. A butcher's boy complains about his wages to a girl with a basket of eggs. In the back row of a church, a mother hisses soft reprimands to her fidgeting son, promising sweets if he sits still until the final hymn. Even the air in libraries is thick with whispers. At the British Museum reading room, you pass two scholars arguing sotto voce. It's not Herodotus that's wrong, it's the translator. Oh yes, because ancient Greek behaves so logically. Books shuffle, a sigh, a sneeze. Pages turn like cautious applause. You begin to listen more deliberately, not out of nosiness, but out of reverence. These voices are the lifeblood of the city. They are its dreams and grievances, spoken aloud and left afloat. At a pub, a man confesses something to his pint. She said she loved me, but she also said the same to Mr. Dixon's cat, so who knows? The barman nods with practiced sympathy. Not agreement, just acknowledgement. Sometimes that is enough. Children's conversations are more curious, more uncensored. Near a gutter, two boys debate how many frogs it would take to fill the Queen's bathtub. A third says he's already tried but was caught after 3. You smile, unseen. In alleyways, the talk is sharper. Two washerwomen exchange news while wringing sheets. I saw the inspector again, 3 doors down this time. Something's not right on that street, too quiet. Quiet's worse than noise. Noise means people are still alive. They speak like bells, low and deliberate. You notice how accents change from borough to borough. In Lambeth, vowels stretch. In Clerkenwell, they snap like twigs. In Mayfair, voices are wrapped in silk, while in Shoreditch, they tumble like dice across cobblestones. Even silence here says something. On a park bench, 2 old men sit without speaking for nearly half an hour, but their bodies lean ever so slightly toward each other. Their coats brush at the cuffs, and when one coughs, the other passes him a sweet from a paper twist. A conversation of gestures. You overhear joy, despair, boredom. A woman in a hat shop. murmurs to herself. If he sees me in this, maybe he'll stay longer. A carriage driver grumbles. Blasted fog's worse than my mother-in-law. A girl on a step sings softly to her doll, inventing a lullaby as she goes. Even inside churches where solemnity reigns, voices drift. I don't believe half of it, one woman mutters during the sermon, but the singing's pretty. Shh, says her friend. He'll hear you. The Lord? No, the vicar. His ears are sharp. The city's murmur continues after dark. Through cracked windows and under gas lamp glow, you catch stray lines. Just one more hand. She didn't come back last night. It was only a kiss, I swear. I'll meet you by the clock tower. They say the fog eats the lonely. And then, there's laughter. It bursts out of taverns, skips across cobblestones, bounces between buildings. Some of it is mean, some bitter, but most is shared. The kind of laughter that comes from knowing the world is too heavy not to joke about. You, the listener, become a collector, not of secrets, but of texture. The phrases, the idioms, the small absurdities. You carry them like coins, spend them, in thoughts, smile at them later when the streets have gone quiet. And when you return home, boots muddy, head full, you find yourself repeating them in your mind. The one with the eyes, like wet marbles. She said the same to Mr. Dixon's. They say the fog eats the lonely. A city can be known by its buildings, its maps, its monuments. But London is best known by its voices, those half-heard, half-felt utterances that rise and vanish in the fog. They are not noise. They are stories, paused, waiting for someone like you to hear them. There are many arts one must master to live comfortably in Victorian London. The art of avoiding puddles, of nodding politely without engaging in conversation, of knowing when a penny pie contains more hope than meat. But none is more important, nor more quietly heroic than the art of not freezing. Cold in London is not theatrical. It does not howl or glitter. It simply arrives one morning and does not leave. It seeps into the mortar between bricks, into the gaps beneath door frames, into fingers, toes, and the bones behind your teeth. It enters houses uninvited and sits in corners like a judgmental aunt. And yet, people carry on. Not because they do not feel the cold, but because they know it too well to fight it directly. Instead, they have developed an entire philosophy of warmth, built not on denial but on ingenuity. You wake one morning in your boarding house to find your breath clouding before your face. The fire has gone out during the night, and the coal scuttle is empty. Your blanket feels more like a damp flag than a comforter. Still, you rise. You begin layering like a scholar, adding footnotes. Shirt, vest, second shirt, scarf. Indoors. Wool socks over cotton ones. Gloves, fingerless for function. A cap pulled low. You catch sight of yourself in the mirror and chuckle. You look less like a citizen and more like a bundle of laundry. On a mission. Downstairs, Miss Heddle is already at the range, feeding it coal with practiced resentment. Colder than a banker's heart, she mutters, not looking up. She offers you tea so strong it could scald the chill right out of your spine. There's a trick to heating a room. A good fire is the heart. But everything else, the kettle left steaming, the drapes drawn just right, the door wedged to keep the draft from creeping in, matters too. Many households keep bricks by the fire, which are then wrapped in cloth and tucked under covers. Others swear by hot potatoes placed in pockets or hugged in bed until sleep arrives. One enterprising gentleman once carried a baked onion under his hat, though the results were divisive. In the better homes, footmen wake before dawn to lay fires in sleeping rooms. Maids warm slippers by the hearth. Bedpans filled with hot. Coals are slipped beneath sheets. It is a luxury not of excess, but of timing. In less fortunate quarters, warmth is communal. 5 children to a bed, 2 families to a stove. The windows are iced over on the inside, and any tea not drunk within 5 minutes returns to its solid origins. Yet even here, tricks abound. Newspaper stuffed in boots, shawls worn as skirts. A cat on the lap is as good as a blanket, and often more agreeable. You venture into the city, boots crunching frost. The air pinches your nose and numbs your ears. Steam rises from bakery chimneys and sewer grates alike. The streets are quieter, people walk faster, hands buried deep, conversation abbreviated by necessity. Vendors adapt. The chestnut sellers do brisk business, their coal pans glowing like beacons. Soup carts offer ladles of something hot and ambiguous. One man sells roasted beetroot, a strange but oddly satisfying remedy against the chill. Even the cab horses wear blankets. The drivers stamp their feet and wrap their hands in fingerless mitts, passing small flasks from pocket to pocket with nods of solidarity. In shop windows, scarves bloom like winter flowers. Glove shops display wool in every shade. Tin foot warmers are advertised with dramatic flair. Keep your toes alive this season. You pause outside a tavern and peer in. Inside, patrons huddle around a fire. Their cheeks are red, their pints steaming. Laughter fogs the air. Someone sings a song about snow that ends in heartbreak and rhubarb. It is too crowded to enter, but the warmth somehow radiates through the glass. You continue. There are places, of course, where the cold does more than bite. It takes. Along the riverbanks, beneath the bridges, in doorways where no hearth waits. Here, the art of not freezing becomes a test of endurance. The city knows this, though it rarely admits it aloud. A few churches open at night. Soup kitchens run longer hours. But mostly, people rely on each other. A scarf passed from stranger to stranger. A warm bun left on a step. A fire built in a barrel by men who speak little but gesture generously. Back home, night falls early. You light your own fire, gently coaxing flame from coal and paper. The room warms by degrees, from Arctic cave to mild cellar. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders, not stylish but necessary. Mr. Treble knocks at your door and offers a game of chess. You play near the fire, sharing the warmth, the silence, the comfort of company. Outside, snow begins to fall, not heavily, but with the quiet certainty of winter's rule. The city hushes itself. The gas lamps glow more, golden. The rooftops begin to wear soft white caps, and you, wrapped in wool and companionship, realize something simple. In Victorian London, warmth is not just a temperature. It is a ritual, a kindness, a shared understanding that life, however difficult, continues best when done close together. You blow out the lamp. The fire cracks softly, and the cold, for tonight, is kept at bay. If London had a heartbeat, it would not thump, it would tick, a soft, deliberate sound layered 1,000-fold. Not from one great clock, though Big Ben stands nobly above the fog like a metronome in marble, but from hundreds of timekeepers, church bells, street clocks, watches in waistcoat pockets, bells on doors, and voices calling the hour through alleys like echoes of the invisible. Time in Victorian London is not just counted, it is lived. You feel it the moment you wake, not because your body insists, but because the city nudges. Somewhere a bell chimes 6. You hear it faintly through the walls of your lodging, St. George's perhaps, or St. Mary Woolnoth. Moments later, another joins, from another church, a few blocks away but equally determined. It is not synchronized. London's time is rarely exact. Each bellkeeper sets his clock slightly differently, and so the hours roll in like waves, first one, then another, then a third, slower and more solemn. This, in itself, is comforting. You rise to the sound of coal being shoveled into a scuttle downstairs. Miss Heddle runs her house not by the hour but by routine. Porridge by 7, eggs by 8, and by 9, the hallway smells faintly of polish and boiled cloth. Yet outside these walls, time is fiercely guarded. Factory whistles pierce the air at fixed intervals. At the docks, a horn sounds not to begin the work but to remind you that you are already late. Time equals productivity, wages, reputation, the difference between a hot supper and a docked shilling. Pocket watches are everywhere, some worn like medals, heavy with chain and pride. Others secreted away in inner pockets, cheap, cracked but reliable enough to keep a man employed. Street vendors hawk watches of dubious origin, swearing they keep perfect time, except on Tuesdays. Public clocks appear on banks, libraries, even lampposts. but none are quite trusted. Each ticks with a slightly different heartbeat. Londoners, ever adaptable, average them in their minds. You watch as a messenger boy checks the time on a clock above a butcher's shop, then compares it to the church bell's echo. He shakes his head, shrugs, and sets off at a trot. Precision in London is always approximate. There is something poetic about it. Time here is not a master. It is a companion, sometimes nagging, sometimes forgiving. It accompanies you down streets, into shops, across thresholds. It glances at you from mantelpieces and over your shoulder from the tower above King's Cross. Some people live strictly by it. The banker whose watch is wound at exactly 7:03 each morning. The governess who rings a bell for lessons at 10 sharp. The train conductors who speak of minutes with military gravity. In their world, time is a wall, firm and reliable. Others drift. Artists who forget to sleep. Shopkeepers who open late, but stay until lamplighting. Children who measure days not by clocks, but by the changing patterns of chimney smoke and shadow. For them, time is a tide, felt, not counted. You pass a watchmaker's shop on Fleet Street. The window is crowded, with faces of timepieces, not people. Some ticking in tandem, others with proud independence. The watchmaker sits behind the glass, hunched like a monk at prayer, adjusting a gear so small it could be mistaken for dust. He does not look up. You pause, consider your own watch. It ticks steadily, though you suspect it runs a little fast. Still, it's enough to pace your steps, your meals, your meetings. A comfort, if not a compass. In the afternoon, the sun struggles through the clouds, and shopkeepers glance skyward. It's not the hour they check. It's the light, the shortening of shadows, the turn toward dusk. London's day is ruled less by the dial and more by the rhythm of necessity. Lamps are lit not at a fixed time, but when the lamplighter judges the darkness. Dinner is served when the streets grow quieter. Pubs open their arms when the factory doors close. Time flows not as a straight line, but as a spiral, returning again and again to familiar moments, only slightly changed. There is even a time for reflection. In the quiet hour just after supper, you stroll along the embankment. The river speaks in murmurs, the bridges hum with unseen footsteps. A nearby bell chimes 7 times, slow, solemn, not announcing so much as suggesting. A man beside you mutters, "St. Dunstan's again, always 5 minutes slow." You nod, smile. Everyone has an opinion on which clock tells the truth. None are quite correct. All are accepted. Back at your lodging, the fire is lit. The day's final hours tick away softly. Mr. Treble winds his watch 3 times, each motion deliberate. Miss Fry adjusts her clock by 1 minute, just because time is not feared here. It is acknowledged. Somewhere in the city, a newborn cries. An old man sighs into his sleep. A factory gate creaks open for the night shift. All of them obey different clocks. And still, London ticks. Steady, patient, alive. When the sun sinks behind soot-stained rooftops and the final strokes of twilight are swallowed by fog, London does not sleep. It simply changes. By daylight, the city pulses with commerce and conversation. But at night, beneath the quiet flicker of gas lamps, it exhales. The rhythm slows, footsteps soften, shadows lengthen, and the city becomes something else entirely. Less clockwork, more dream. You notice it first in the light. Gas lamps line the main thoroughfares, their amber glow diffused by the mist. They are not bright. They do not banish darkness. They sculpt it, cutting pools of warmth into the gray like candlelight on old parchment. Each flame is tended by a lamplighter, a silent craftsman of the evening. He moves methodically, pole in hand, igniting one globe after another. The hiss of flame, the slight whoosh of ignition. His silhouette flickers like a figure from a lantern show. And then he disappears, already lighting the next corner. In the lamplight, the city transforms. Shops close their shutters. Taverns come alive. Windows glow from within. Street vendors vanish, replaced by others. The sellers of roasted chestnuts, of toasted cheese, of hot drinks served from kettles hanging over coals. Their calls are softer now, tinged with fatigue or flirtation. Warm your bones, love. Penny for a nibble. You walk through it all, coat buttoned to the throat, gloved, hands in pockets, boots clicking softly against the stones. Around you, the night unfolds like a novel without chapters. A constable strolls past, his pace unhurried, his eyes alert. He taps his truncheon lightly against his boot, once, then twice. A quiet rhythm, a warning, or perhaps a reassurance. From an alley, music floats, a violin played not for an audience but for memory. A tune from a time before the player's coat grew thin, before the cold settled into his bones. It lingers in the air long after you've walked on. In Soho, laughter spills from behind a curtained door. Theaters have emptied, and actors, flushed, with grease paint and gin, recount lines as if the night were an encore. You hear fragments, and then he said, "Not your umbrella, sir." A burst of cackling. A dog barks once, then thinks better of it. Further on, you pass a woman leaning in a doorway. Her dress is too thin for the cold, her smile practiced. She greets a passing gentleman with a voice that is music and resignation in one. "Evenin', darlin'." "Cold out, ain't it?" The gentleman pauses. Words are exchanged, low, private, veiled in civility. She laughs, but there is no joy in it, only familiarity. You keep walking, head bowed slightly, unsure whether to mourn or admire her. The Thames, under moonlight, is quieter than you expect. Its waters are ink black, glimmering occasionally with reflections of the lamps above. Barges drift like sleeping beasts. Seagulls cry in the distance, their voices softened by fog. You sit for a while, on a bench overlooking the embankment. Nearby, an old man feeds crumbs to a pigeon who seems more friend than pet. He does not speak. He does not need to. Night is when the city's loners come out, not always by choice. You see them in twos and threes, a man in rags arguing with himself, a pair of chimney sweeps playing cards on a crate, a barefoot boy staring up at a starless sky. There is a peculiar honesty to the night. People say less but mean more. Gestures become conversations. Silence becomes company. You pass a row of boarding houses where the windows glow like miniature hearths. Behind one, a woman sings a lullaby, slow, simple, half-hummed. You do not recognize the words, but the tune warms you more than your scarf. A cat slinks across the road, pausing under a gas lamp. Its eyes gleam, catching your gaze with that peculiar feline confidence. It moves on, tail curling like a question. And then, the fog thickens. It arrives not with drama, but with gentleness. You do not see it coming. One moment, the lamp ahead, is clear. The next, it's a blur. The air grows heavier. Sounds become softer. The world folds inward. You are no longer in a city. You are in a memory of one, and somehow it is beautiful. In this muffled London, footsteps matter more. You hear them before you see the walkers. Lovers whispering, a clerk whistling off-key, a child skipping without rhythm. The city is not asleep, it is dreaming, and in its dream, you are not alone. You walk a little slower. You breathe a little, deeper. Each exhale curls into the night like a secret let go. Eventually, you return to your lodging. Miss Heddle has left a candle burning in the hallway. Your room is quiet, the fire low but alive. You remove your coat, your gloves, your thoughts. As you slip into bed, the city outside murmurs on, soft, breathing, eternal. And just before sleep takes you, you hear the final lamplighter of the night extinguish a flame with a whisper. Until tomorrow. Above ground, London hurries. She breathes through chimneys, whispers through alleyways, blinks slowly under gas lamp light. But below the soles of your boots, something older stirs. Not loud, not proud, but necessary. Beneath London lies another, London. It is a city in shadow, in brick and iron and damp. A place of tunnels and trickling echoes of wet stone and forgotten steps. A city not mapped for pleasure but built for function, and sometimes for secrecy. Your descent begins with a drain. It gurgles softly near your lodging, the sort of sound you might mistake for wind. But you know better now. That gentle murmur? It's the city's stomach at work, digesting the day. You follow the sound to a grating near the edge of the pavement. Peer through, and you glimpse darkness interrupted by rivulets of water, and something glinting. A lost coin, or perhaps just whetstone. Beneath that grate runs one of London's lifelines. The sewers, as they are now, are a marvel of the modern age. Designed by Sir Joseph Bazalgette, whose name is rarely remembered outside engineering circles, they were London's answer to a centuries-old problem: filth. Waste, until recently, flowed freely into the Thames, mingling with drinking water and dreams alike. But then came the great stink of 1858, a summer so hot and foul that even Parliament could not ignore the smell. The solution was bold: tunnels, miles of them, beneath the streets, arched, brick-lined, and vast enough in places to ride a boat through. You imagine them now, dark caverns, quietly pulsing with water, filth, and the occasional rat. They are not places of beauty, but there is something poetic in their purpose. The sewers do not discriminate. Rich man's waste and beggar's slop flow together, united in anonymity, and not all who walk there do so by choice. Workers, known as flushers, brave the tunnels by lantern light. Their boots slosh, their voices echo. Some wear scarves soaked in vinegar to soften the stench. Others simply breathe through their mouths and think of the sea. They clear blockages, rescue lost items, sometimes even save lives, though not always, in time. You pass a man one day wearing oilskins and a weary expression. He nods, and you understand without words. He knows what lies beneath. But the sewers are not the only underworld. Beneath the shops, the taverns, even the churches, lie cellars, stone-walled, low-ceilinged, and thick with dust. Many are for storage. Barrels of beer, crates of coal, onions hanging like bats from hooks. Some, though, are stranger. In one forgotten cellar, children once played theater by candlelight, until the floor above caved in, and the stage collapsed into silence. In another, now bricked up, a pawnbroker once hid stolen silver. Convinced, the seller spoke to him at night. Rumors abound. Some say there are tunnels connecting pubs to prisons used by smugglers and lovers alike. Others speak of a chapel buried and sealed where monks still chant in dreams. One persistent tale tells of a chimney sweep who discovered a hidden staircase below Smithfield Market and vanished, only to reappear 3 days later speaking fluent Latin and refusing to explain. You descend one such stairwell near a forgotten churchyard. The door creaks. The air is thick. Dust motes swirl in your lantern's glow. Shelves line the walls, some empty, some holding jars whose contents are best left unnamed. A newspaper from 1841 lies folded beside a broken teacup. You sit, just for a moment. Down here, time softens, it loses its edges, its urgency. You hear water dripping from somewhere above. The creak of wood. Perhaps a mouse, perhaps not. Your breath sounds louder than usual. In the hush, you feel London differently. Up above, people speak of progress. Railways, gaslight, telegraphs. Down here, things linger. History settles like sediment. Dust remembers footsteps. Walls remember touch. Cold, stone, and stillness, yet not lifeless. Even today, some make homes in these spaces. Not many. Not by choice. The desperate. The hunted. The forgotten. They find warmth in boiler rooms, in coal tunnels, in the hollows beneath market stalls. Some carry candles. Some carry nothing but stories. You once met a boy named Elliot who lived beneath a bookseller's shop. He claimed the books whispered when the shop was closed. They argue sometimes, he said, but mostly they sing. You offered him a role. He offered you a drawing, done in charcoal on the back of a theater program. A picture of a staircase that spiraled downward forever. You never saw him again. You emerge hours later, dust on your coat, a chill in your bones. The city above seems louder now, brighter, faster. But your mind lingers below, in the quiet dark, where London holds its secrets. You walk slower than before, more aware of what lies beneath your feet. And when you hear a drain gurgle or feel a gust of warm air rising from a cellar grate, you nod slightly, as if greeting an old friend, because now you understand. The soul of London is not only in its towers and terraces. It is also in its tunnels, in the unseen spaces where the past sleeps and where the city quietly breathes. Close your eyes. Now listen, not just with your ears, but with the curious quiet at the center of your chest. You are standing on a London street in the heart of the Victorian age. Morning. The air is cool, the light soft, and the city is beginning. To speak, it does not shout. It murmurs, in layers, in rhythms, in tiny insistent notes that build and fade like a symphony played by invisible hands. The first sound is that of boots on cobblestones. Hundreds of them, thousands, some brisk, some dragging, some tiptoeing in haste. The click and scuff, the scrape and thud, compose the pulse of the city's morning. Each step tells a story. A man late for his train. A woman hoping not to be noticed. A child chasing after someone who forgot to wave. Then the wheels join in. Omnibuses rattle. Hand carts groan. Wagon wheels creak in protest, iron against stone. They bounce and squeal at every ridge in the road. You can tell the load by the sound. A coal cart rumbles low and steady. A fruit cart chatters lightly like marbles in a tin. Horses clop, snort, and whinny, their hooves echoing in the narrow lanes. They are part of the soundscape too, living instruments in London's marching orchestra. Drivers call out, not with anger, but with the crisp necessity of command. Whoa there! Step two, step two! A boy whistles, 3 quick notes, and a reply comes from across the square. A signal, a greeting, a secret. You walk on and the market speaks. Vendors call, out in song-like cadence. There is melody in their hustle, humor in their rhythm. Hot pies still steamin', turnips fine as a bishop's chin, apples red as your sweetheart's blush. Laughter rises from a group of flower sellers huddled near a tea stall. One of them bursts into a hymn only to be shushed playfully by the others. Their accents are different. Irish lilt, Cockney twang, Welsh roundness. But the music is in their breath, not their birthplace. Nearby, a barrel organ begins to play. Man turns the crank and out spills a tune half recognized, something between a waltz and a lullaby. Children gather, their shoes dusty, faces bright. One begins to dance. Just a little shuffle, arms at their sides. Others follow. Coins drop into the hat laid carefully on the cobblestones. Not far away, a church bell tolls, low, dignified. It rings once for the hour, then once more, perhaps for a funeral. Or a wedding. Or simply because time insists on being marked. You pause. Between the clamor, there is space. A hush, a breath. You hear the rustle of a newspaper. The quiet sob of someone too tired to hide it. The scrape of a match against a wall, followed by the sharp inhale of tobacco. In an alley, a fiddler plays a tune to no one but the rats in the brick. It is beautiful and strange. It carries sorrow and supper in equal measure. The city has music halls too, of course, grand, glittering, places where pianos tinkle and sopranos soar. But those are not the only places music lives. It lives in parlors where girls in gloves practice scales. It lives in pubs where drunkards sing old ballads off-key but full-hearted. It lives in prisons where inmates hum in the dark to remember their mother's voices. It lives in silence too. Yes, even London has silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness. At twilight, when fog thickens and footsteps fade, you may find yourself standing on a bridge. Below, the Thames laps softly against stone. A seagull calls, a distant violin plays, and the rest, is quiet, not dead, not gone, just listening. Even in such a vast city, moments like this exist. Moments where the city waits, holds its breath, listens to itself. You begin to notice how the soundscape changes with the hour. Morning is all bustle and bark, afternoon is clatter and commerce, evening grows warmer, with laughter and song. Night. Night is different. At night, the loudest sounds are imagined. You hear things not because they are loud, but because everything else has gone still. A shutter tapping, a clock ticking, a baby crying through a thin wall, the creak of your own thoughts, and then, just before sleep, the lullaby of the lamplighter. His footsteps, his pole, the soft click of flame, a faint whistle. London whispers you to sleep. In dreams you may hear it again, the hum of its soul, a mix of sorrow and hope, tin and velvet, boots and bells, a city of sounds, a city of life. And if you listen closely enough, long enough, patiently and gently enough, you may hear the softest sound of all, the city breathing. There's something about sickness that makes a city feel smaller. In the vastness of Victorian London, with its towering chimneys and rivers of people, illness draws the world inward. A single cough can seem louder than a carriage. A fever dims the gas lamps. The streets continue to bustle, yes, but for the sick, the city becomes a quieter place, closer, slower, and laced with 1,000 kinds of hope. You wake one morning to the sound of coughing, not the polite, throat-clearing sort. A real cough, wet, persistent, echoing through the boarding house walls. Miss Heddle, it seems, is unwell. She appears at breakfast with a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her voice reduced to a whisper. "Just a bit of a chill," she says, waving away concern, though the porridge boils unattended and her cup of tea goes cold in her hand. In Victorian London, illness is as much a part of life as the weather. Everyone at some point falls ill. A cold that lingers, a stomach gone wrong, a rash, a fever, a wound that will not close. And when it happens, the city responds not with alarm, but with custom. There is no national health service, no universal right to care. Medicine exists in layers, like the city itself. Some can summon a private physician, who arrives in a dark coat and glances meaningfully at one's tongue. Others rely on charity hospitals, where the line to be seen is as long as the prescriptions are brief. Many more make do with what they have: herbs in jars, advice from neighbors, and a prayer murmured between spoons of broth. You decide to visit the chemist on behalf of Miss Heddle. The shop smells of camphor, lavender, and just a hint of vinegar. Bottles line the walls, blue glass, green glass, brown. Some are neatly labeled, others marked with barely legible script. Behind the counter stands the apothecary, a man with wire spectacles and hands so steady they seem carved. "She's coughing." "Is she?" he says, not looking up. "Is it dry, wet, sharp, lingering?" You describe it as best you can. He selects a mixture of laudanum and horehound syrup, wrapped in brown paper and sealed with wax. 2 spoons before bed, he advises, and tell her to rest if she'll listen. Rest, of course, is not always possible. Miss Heddle keeps the boarding house running even as her voice fades and her steps slow. But the tenants notice. Mr. Treble brings her a warmed brick wrapped in flannel. Miss Fry, rarely sentimental, leaves a small bowl of cut oranges at her door. You bring tea, steaming and honeyed, and sit quietly while she naps upright in her chair. These are the rituals of care, small, wordless, deeply human, and they are everywhere. In homes across the city, 1,000 such acts take place. A mother lays a damp cloth on her child's forehead. A husband writes a letter in careful script, requesting a visit from the parish nurse. A neighbor drops off a pot of broth with a note that says nothing but, "Eat this." Of course, not all ailments are so gentle. There are diseases here that frighten even the bravest. Cholera, consumption, typhoid, diphtheria. They strike quickly, cruelly. Sometimes entire buildings are emptied within a week. Black cloths appear over windows. Doctors enter and do not return. You pass one such home on a back street in Clerkenwell. A man sits on the step, head in hands. A nurse leaves the house, her apron stained, her face unreadable. The street continues as if nothing has happened. That is the hardest part of illness in a city this large, how the world goes on without noticing. But in hospitals, the battle is more visible. You visit St. Bartholomew's one afternoon, a building, old and solemn, filled with the scent of carbolic and hope. The wards are narrow. Beds line the walls. Patients stare at ceilings waiting. Nurses move briskly, their faces set with quiet resolve. A doctor enters, a tall man with tired eyes and a watch on a chain. He greets each patient by name. He lifts, bandages, listens to chests, scribbles notes. There is no magic here, only method, and a strange kind of grace. You watch as he sits with a boy no older than 12, his leg bound in splints. The doctor smiles, tells a joke. The boy laughs, and for a moment the ward brightens. It is not cure that keeps people alive, you realize. It is care. Outside, the air feels sharper. The city breathes, unaware of the small wars being fought in its corners. But you notice. You carry them with you. Each cough, each kindness, each whisper of just a bit of a chill that hides the fear beneath. You return home. Miss Heddle is better. Her cough has softened. Her tea is warm. She thanks you with a nod and offers you a biscuit too stale to eat. You take it anyway, because this too is medicine. Later that night, you sit by your window. The city hums below. Somewhere a baby cries. A dog barks. A church bell tolls softly in the distance, and in one room behind one window, a candle burns longer than the rest. A sign that someone still wakes, still watches, still hopes. In sickness and in health, London endures. Not because of hospitals or doctors alone, but because of people, quiet, steady, kind, who care. Autumn does not arrive in London all at once. She tiptoes in. You feel her first in the shadows, longer, cooler, stretching across the cobblestones like ribbons of memory. Then in the mornings, when breath begins to show and the tea feels warmer, more necessary. Finally, you see her in the trees, the way their edges fray into gold, then copper, then a weary kind of brown. The air shifts. It smells of earth, of coal smoke, and something more elusive. Something like nostalgia, though you cannot name for what. Perhaps for summers that never quite warmed, perhaps for fires that have yet to be lit. Victorian London wears autumn like a well-worn cloak. Its rooftops glisten with dew. Its gutters fill with leaves. The fog comes earlier now, thicker, more deliberate. It clings to your collar as you walk, wraps itself around lampposts, pools in alleyways like puddled thoughts. You step outside one morning and the city feels quieter. Not silent, no, London is never silent, but subdued. The street vendors' cries are muffled. The horses' hooves thud rather than clatter. Even the river seems to move more slowly, as if pondering its direction. You walk through Hyde Park, where the trees begin to drop their leaves like forgotten letters. Children kick through piles of them, chasing each other with red cheeks and scarves unraveling. Nannies call out half-heartedly, their hands tucked deep in their sleeves. A man sits on a bench sketching. His pencil barely moves. He stares at the branches above, tracing their silhouette against a sky the color of cooled ash. You wonder what he sees that you cannot. At the market, apples appear, crisp and red, with the occasional bruised sweetness of windfall. Chestnuts roast again, their scent rising with the smoke of early fires. Sellers wrap scarves tighter. Customers linger less. You visit your usual tea shop. The windows are fogged from within, the glass scribbled by fingers of children waiting for mothers to finish their shopping. Inside, the air is warm, spiced with cinnamon. A seasonal blend is offered. Autumn gold. You try it. It tastes like comfort with a hint of regret. Autumn changes people. Miss Heddle begins lighting the hallway lamp earlier, muttering about the hours folding up on themselves. Mr. Treble wears 2 waistcoats, though he denies the chill. Miss Fry plays slower melodies on her piano, pausing more often between notes. At night, the room seemed darker even with the lamps lit. The fire becomes a focal point, not just for warmth, but for companionship. People talk less, but listen more. There is something about the season that draws thought inward. You begin to notice things you hadn't before. The pattern of raindrops on the window, the way candle wax pools and hardens like frozen breath. The sound of pages turning in a book read slowly, with intent. The fog thickens with each passing week. By November, it arrives in the early afternoon and does not lift until well past dawn. It is no longer playful. It is presence. It turns the familiar into the ghostly. A street you've walked 100 times becomes unknowable. Shapes move and vanish. Footsteps echo without visible cause. People speak of London particular, the city's unique fog, born of coal smoke, moisture, and a certain melancholy. It settles like a quilt over rooftops, softening the harshness of soot and stone. But it also hides. There are stories of people vanishing in fog. Not forever, just long enough to change. One woman insists her husband returned after an hour in the mist with white hair and no memory of where he'd gone. A child claims to have followed a cat into the fog and emerged with a coin from a country that doesn't exist. You walk through it one evening, gloved hands tucked into your coat, hat pulled low. The lamps glow dimly, each one a golden orb floating in a sea of gray. You pass silhouettes, some familiar, others less so. A violin plays somewhere, soft and slow, like the season itself. Your footsteps are the only thing that anchors you. You arrive home with damp shoulders and a new sense of reverence. The fire is lit, tea is warm. Miss Heddle has placed a bowl of apples on the table, though no one asked. The boarding house feels smaller now, but in a comforting way, like a coat that fits more snugly as the days grow colder. Autumn in London is not just a season, it is a state of mind, a gentle slowing, a soft turning inward. It is the city preparing for sleep but not quite closing its eyes. It is remembering without regret what it once was and what it will soon become. And in that remembering, there is beauty. In the smoke that rises from chimneys like drifting thoughts, in the leaves that fall like forgotten lines of poetry, in the fog that erases the edges, so that everything might be looked at anew. You sit by the window, a blanket around your knees, and watch the city disappear into mist, and it is enough. In a city of smoke and stone, where names are often forgotten faster than they're spoken, it might seem easy to feel alone. But even in the bustle of Victorian London, connection persists. It hides between folded pages, behind curtained windows, in glances exchanged beneath gaslight. Love in London is quiet. It must be. There is simply too much noise for it to shout. Instead, it writes. You begin to notice it in the post. Letters, passed from hand to hand, from corner boy to carriage, from dusty hallway table to trembling fingers. They arrive with ink smudged, folded carefully, sealed with wax or merely pressed closed and whispered over. A young woman at the boarding house receives one every Tuesday. Always from the same hand, always opened in the privacy of her room. She returns from the post with a face unreadable and eyes that carry something warm, and just a little sad. She never speaks of the sender. No one asks. In London, privacy is the currency of affection. You pass a postman each morning near the square. He whistles a tune as he sorts, but he knows every name, every door. His bag is heavy, but he carries more than news. Sometimes hope, sometimes regret, occasionally both in the same envelope. In an alley off Fleet Street, you see a boy no older than 10, reading aloud a letter he clearly cannot fully understand. He does so in front of an older woman with calloused hands and an apron still dusted with flour. Her eyes close as he speaks. She's not listening to him. She's hearing a voice from far away, from home perhaps, or from a time that cannot return. Letters are not always grand. They do not always say, I love you. More often they say, are you warm? Or, I miss the sound of your shoes on the stairs. Sometimes they include pressed flowers, sketches, or crumbs that once lived near cake. Some people send lanterns instead. In the poorer parts of the city, where post is a luxury and distance is measured in alleyways, lanterns serve as signals. A lantern left in a window means, I'm still awake. A flicker 3 times is a warning. A lantern covered, then revealed, means come now. You first learn this from Elliot, the boy who once lived below a bookshop. They don't say it's code, he told you, but it is. For love, or for fear, or for something in between. One night while walking through Whitechapel, you see it for yourself. A light, dim and swaying, placed just inside a window. A man on the opposite corner nods slightly, turns, and disappears into the fog. Not a word is spoken, but everything needed was said. Love in London is built from fragments. It exists in the glove dropped on purpose, then returned with the hint of a smile. In the extra sugar left in tea. In the lull in conversation where no one speaks because nothing more is needed. Sometimes it is born in shop queues, a baker's assistant and a nursemaid, meeting daily between 6:00 and 6:15, exchanging bread and glances. Neither says more than, good morning, but both begin waking earlier. Sometimes it is scribbled in margins. A scholar leaves notes in the books he returns to the lending library, addressed not to the librarian, but to whoever may borrow. Next, page 43, this line reminded me of how she spoke. You find one such note in a novel by Mr. Dickens, you leave a reply, page 127. Perhaps she remembers you too. In this way, strangers become connected not through names, but through words and feelings left behind. Of course, love is not always requited. There is heartbreak in London. There must be. A city so large cannot protect every heart. You see it in the man who walks the same street each night, passing a certain window with flowers in it. He never looks in, he only slows, then keeps walking. You hear it in the sigh of the violinist who plays by the Thames, always the same song, always at dusk as if someone might be listening across the water. You read it in the lines of poems pasted to fences, unsigned and slowly worn by rain. I wrote you a letter I could never send, so I tucked it beneath the cobblestones instead. And yet, even this ache is beautiful, because it means someone once tried, someone once hoped, someone once believed that in a city of millions there might be one heart shaped just like theirs. Back at your boarding house you receive a letter, not addressed to you, but slipped into your door by mistake. The name is close to yours. You hesitate, then return it to Miss Heddle. She opens it, frowns, then laughs softly. Wrong room, but right sentiment, she murmurs, before sliding it into her apron pocket and saying no more. That night, you dream of letters drifting like autumn leaves, of lanterns glowing like stars low to the ground, of feet meeting on staircases and voices caught in curtains. In a city built of fog and formality, love still finds a way to flicker through. Not loudly, not all at once, but steadily like candlelight behind glass. There are things in London no one speaks of, but everyone knows. They hover just beneath the surface like breath on a mirror, half-remembered rules, warnings wrapped in nursery rhymes, gestures passed from grandmother to granddaughter. They are not written into law, nor taught in school, and yet they guide choices, shape fears, and sometimes quietly offer comfort. These are the city's hidden beliefs, its breathless superstitions, its whispering rules. You first hear of them in passing. A chimney sweep, brushing soot from his sleeves, says to you, if the wind's west by morning, best stay home, too many changes in the air. He taps his boot 3 times before walking on, leaving behind nothing but a trail of ash and a feeling that lingers. Victorian London is a place of industry, science, and steam, but it is also a place of magic. Not the kind with wands and wizards, but the softer sort. The kind tucked into pockets. The kind whispered at thresholds. The kind carried in the weight of a glance. Children carry lucky buttons, sewn inside coats, hidden beneath bonnets. The buttons may be chipped or dull, but they are chosen, touched before tests, kissed before storms. Flower girls wear a red thread around one wrist, not for fashion but for protection, against coughs, against cruel luck, against forgetting who you are. A cabman tells you never to drive a widow on a Thursday. It brings rain, he says with certainty, and worse. You meet a laundress who keeps a sprig of rosemary above her door. Not for scent, she insists, but to keep away quarrels. These things are not explained. They are simply done, and so you begin to see them. A baker touches each loaf twice before baking, once for health, once for safety. A newsboy spits over his left shoulder when the church bell strikes 12. A seamstress refuses to stitch after sunset unless she sings. Needles don't like silence, she tells you, deadpan. You walk through a market one morning, and a seller refuses to take your coin. Right hand only, she scolds, smiling. Left's for goodbye, and you're too young to be leaving. Even the weather carries meaning. Rain before dawn means luck in love. Mist after midday is a sign to be still. A sudden gust that lifts your hat. Someone thinking of you from far away. And then there are the crows. Always the crows. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never told. You recite it almost by instinct one day after spotting a pair on a lamppost. A butcher nearby nods approvingly. You know the rhyme then, he says. Just don't speak it backwards. Not unless you want something, following you home. There is laughter in superstition, yes, but there is also reverence. In a city so crowded, so chaotic, these small rituals are anchors. They offer control over what cannot be named. A way to navigate a world that is often unkind or simply unknowable. At a pawn shop, you watch a woman refuse to sell a locket. It keeps the baby's breath safe, she mutters, even if he's gone. A beggar near St. Giles offers fortunes for a penny. His eyes milky, his hands like maps. You give him a coin, not for prediction, but for the strange comfort his nonsense brings. Beware Tuesdays, he whispers, and look for the cat with 3 whiskers, she knows the way. You nod because what else can you do? Even in death, the old beliefs hold. Mirrors are covered when someone passes. Clocks are stopped. Doors are opened briefly to let the spirit fly. Coins are placed on the eyes not for payment, but to ensure they stay shut. A lamplighter tells you that on All Hallows' Eve the fog is not entirely fog, that it carries voices if you listen between the gas lamps. You try once, standing very still on a bridge near midnight. You hear wind, water, the whisper of leaves, and something more. Not quite sound, not quite silence, just presence. Not all believe, of course. Mr. Treble scoffs at such talk. Superstition is the cousin of fear, he says, polishing his spectacles, but even he won't walk under ladders. Out of habit, he insists, not belief. Miss Heddle keeps an iron horseshoe nailed to the back door. Came with the house, she says, seems ungrateful to remove it. And you? You find yourself knocking wood when thoughts grow too grim, turning your spoon thrice before sipping broth. Avoiding the number 13 when possible, not because you believe, but because it costs nothing, and because somehow it helps. One foggy evening you meet a man who carries a pouch of salt in his coat. For balance, he says simply. Life tips easier than we think. You ask if it works. He smiles. I'm still standing, aren't I? That night you place a button in your pocket, no reason, just because, and in the morning when the wind blows west you stay indoors, just in case. In a city as old as London, time does not pass. It lingers. It settles in the corners of staircases, in the folds of curtains, in the hairline cracks of wallpaper that no one ever quite manages to mend. It breathes through the drafts beneath. Doors. It peers out from windows, long after the people who once stood behind them have gone. Some call them ghosts, others call them stories that refuse to end. Victorian London is a city steeped in memory. And not all memory is willing to rest. You first hear of them in whispers. Miss Fry, one evening by the fire, mentions a curtain that moves without breeze. Just the house settling, she says quickly, but glances at the window as if expecting a reply. Mr. Treble tells you the mirror in his room fogs at the same hour each night, regardless of weather. Condensation, of course, he mutters. But it's always shaped like a handprint. Miss Heddle, though not one to indulge fancy, once confides after too much tea. There's a woman who stands on the landing sometimes. I've seen her. Never speaks. Just watches. Probably nonsense, but I've taken to saying goodnight just in case. You begin to notice things. A door that creaks open even after it's latched. A cold patch in the hallway that never warms, even in summer. A scent of rosewater in the attic, though no one has used such perfume in years. You learn quickly, London's ghosts are not theatrical. They do not rattle chains or moan in corridors. They are quieter, politer even. They live in glances, in silence, in the spaces between footsteps. A child in Lambeth insists a man lives beneath the stairs. He hums when I sleep, she says cheerfully, as if it's a comfort. Her parents say it's imagination, but they've moved her bed away from the stairwell just in case. A pub near Blackfriars is known for a mirror that shows a woman in green, always seated, always reading. Staff leave a chair for her in the corner. She was here before we were, they shrug. You walk past windows at dusk, and sometimes, just sometimes, you feel eyes behind the lace curtains. Not unkind, not angry, just watching, waiting, remembering. And isn't that what a ghost is? A memory with nowhere else to go. You visit an old theater now converted to flats. The usher tells you stories while sweeping. Back when it was the Royal Nightingale, we had a soprano, beautiful, they say, voice like silver rain. Disappeared one night after curtain call. Some say heartbreak, some say murder. Either way, sometimes the lights flicker when someone sings in the stairwell. Like she's listening. You ask if he believes it. He shrugs. I keep a candle on. The back wall. She likes the light, I think. Not all ghosts are people, some are places. Relived. An alley behind Holborn is said to echo with footsteps long after midnight. Heavy boots, running, then silence. No one is ever seen. But shopkeepers find their sign swaying come morning. A house in Spitalfields has a locked room no tenant opens. The landlord says it's just storage. The maid says she hears crying from behind the door. It's old sadness, she explains with the weary patience of someone who has learned not to question. In churches, it's bells that ring once too, often. In factories, it's tools found moved after hours. In schools, it's chalk on the board no one touched. But what if these are not hauntings? What if they are remainders? London has lost so much. Fires, floods, wars, walls pulled down, graves built over. Yet still, something remains. The weight of lives lived in tight quarters and grand rooms. The echoes of hands once folded in prayer, or fists clenched in protest. You visit a cemetery one fogged afternoon, Highgate perhaps, or Brompton. Statues stand solemn, cloaked in ivy and drizzle. Names weathered, dates almost illegible. You pause before one grave. No inscription, only the word, Mother. A robin perches on the stone, its red breast bright in the gray. It watches you without fear, and for a moment, you feel something settle behind you. Not cold, not alarming. Just presence, a stillness with memory. You do not turn. Back at your lodging, your candle flickers twice before catching steady. You pour tea, and for no reason at all, pour a second cup. You place it on the mantel and say nothing. Not out of belief. Out of courtesy. Because in this city you are never quite alone. Not entirely, and that in its own way is a comfort. In London, people leave all the time. They leave houses, jobs, names, neighborhoods. Some slip away without a sound. Others depart with fanfare, with trunks and tears and tightly folded letters. But no one ever really leaves without leaving something. Behind Victorian London knows this. She is a city of thresholds, of handshakes at stations, of doors that close slowly, of windows where figures wave until the street turns. To say goodbye here is not dramatic. It is delicate. Sometimes it begins with a box. Miss Heddle begins packing one morning. A small trunk, nothing grand. A niece, it turns out, has sent for her from the coast. Just for a fortnight, she says, but her tone suggests longer. She folds her shawl with care, adds 2 books, a dried sprig of lavender. You offer to help. She declines with a smile. A good departure, she says, should be done slowly. Otherwise, the house forgets you too soon. You wonder if this is true. London has seen so many comings and goings. Whole generations have arrived, struggled, stayed, vanished. Some leave on boats bound for Canada, Australia, unknown colonies scribbled in atlas margins. Some go no farther than the next borough, but the loss is just as sharp. You pass a family one day on the steps of their house, father with a hat too clean, mother holding back tears, children wide-eyed. A cart waits nearby. The landlord frowns, impatiently. Change hangs in the air like wood smoke. Not every departure is chosen. The newspapers are filled with names, obituaries and bankruptcies, transfers and accidents. Some lives end abruptly, others drift into footnotes. But all are marked in some way. In this city, even a hat left behind on a hook can make a room feel haunted. You visit a friend at King's Cross Station. He's bound for Glasgow, though he's promised to return by Christmas. You walk with him along the platform, boots echoing on tile. He talks of business and timetables, but avoids the word farewell. When the train hisses and lurches forward, he tips his hat from the window. You wave. And somehow, in the moment after the carriage disappears, the platform feels larger and quieter. Saying goodbye does not always involve words. In boarding houses, departures are often marked by absence, a plate left clean on the table, a coat peg suddenly empty, a door left ajar as if someone might return just for a moment to retrieve a forgotten glove. Mr. Treble once said, "A room doesn't notice your arrival, but it remembers when you leave. At first you thought it was nonsense, but now you're not so sure." You pass a shop in Soho with "To Let" in the window. The counters still gleam. A half-written sign remains on the wall. Fresh deliveries expected, but the rest trails off. There's a single teacup left on the shelf. You pause. Someone's life used to hum here, and now only stillness, and perhaps memory. In London cemeteries, goodbyes are formalized in stone. Angels with chipped wings, names carved deep, dates held together by dashes. Some epitaphs are grand, others bare. Beloved wife, lost too soon, at rest. But you also find smaller farewells elsewhere. A letter folded beneath a floorboard, a name scratched into brick, a scarf tied to a railing. London carries goodbyes in quiet ways. You once found a book in a second-hand stall with an inscription, "To my dearest Elle, for the long journey ahead. Come back if you can, but if you can't, remember us when you sleep." There was no date, no name, but it stayed with you. Some farewells are not to people, but to selves. A woman leaves behind her title and takes up the trade of dressmaking. A man sells his violin and stops whistling in the mornings. A boy stops writing letters and learns to forget a face. These goodbyes are the hardest, for how does one mourn what still walks beside them? Still, even the softest partings deserve recognition. Londoners light candles for those lost at sea. They place pebbles on gravestones. They keep letters tied in ribbon, though the ink has faded. And sometimes they say nothing. They simply remember. One evening, the boarding house is quiet. Miss Heddle's room is locked. A kettle whistles, but no one moves. The hallway lamp burns, lower than usual. You sit by the fire with your tea and think of all the small things left behind. Her half-finished crossword, the faint smell of soap, the way she always turned down the radio when writing a note. You realize something gently. To live in London is to live in a place stitched together by farewells. Some loud, some silent, but all real, and in every goodbye, Something of the city lingers, a warmth, a shape, a scent, so that even when someone is gone, they are never truly lost. They are just elsewhere, carried forward in the city's breath. It is easy in Victorian London to overlook a woman, to see the bonnet but not the face, the gloves but not the hands that mend, lift, knead, and comfort, to mistake silence for smallness, to think power must come with noise. But if you listen, softly, patiently, you'll hear it, in the rustle of skirts sweeping the steps before dawn, in the clink of teacups arranged by trembling fingers, in the scratch of pen on paper behind closed doors. Power, here, is not thunder. It is steady rain. Miss Heddle, long before she packed her case and left the boarding house, ran the home with an instinct honed not by pride, but necessity. No one asked where the clean towels came from. No one noticed how she soothed fevers, with broth and silence. But the house moved because she did. Down the street lives a laundress named Miriam. You meet her once, hauling baskets with arms stronger than most bricklayers. She does not speak much. But one day, she mends your shirt, without asking, fine stitching like small truths sewn into cloth. She raised 4 children on 2 pennies and a prayer. When her youngest caught the fever, she sat by his bed for 3 days, singing songs from a country she no longer remembers the name of. He survived. She did not tell anyone. She just returned to the wash house the next week. There's Sarah, the teacher, who spends her days with 30 children and her evenings with Shakespeare. Her fingers are ink-stained. Her voice is hoarse. But the girls in her class begin to write things that make their fathers pause and say, "Where did you learn that?" There's Mary, who sells flowers by St. Paul's. She knows which blossoms bring comfort and which bring love. She watches lovers pass and knows before they do whether the courtship will last. She never married. Too much to arrange in the world already, she says with a smile. These women shape the city in ways no monument records. They are the ones who remember birthdays no one else recalls, who bury cats in the back garden without telling the children, who bandage the neighbor's wound and scold the drunk before he stumbles into the gutter, who see the smallest injustice and correct it with a glance, a biscuit, or a look that could wither marble. In a nearby clinic, a nurse named Lillian boils her instruments before it becomes law to do so. She sings to dying men in a language they do not understand, and they calm anyway. When her superior questions her softness, she replies, "I give what time has not yet taken." There are women who write under names not their own, who hold meetings in parlors while pretending it's for sewing, who feed revolution with bread and borrowed books, not to burn the city but to remind it of its soul. Even in fashion there is quiet defiance, a bonnet tilted just so, a ribbon knotted a certain way, a brooch containing not a picture, but a tiny scrap of poetry rolled tight as a wish. And the girls? They watch everything, the little ones who play hopscotch in muddy boots and recite lines from penny novels, who steal buttons and carry secrets in their pockets, who learn far too early that the world does not listen to quiet voices. So, they whisper to each other instead. One day one of them will take over the boarding house. Another will travel to Canada with nothing but a trunk and a dream. Another will become a midwife and bring 1,000 lives into the world, and hold more hands than any priest ever could. They are not saints. They get tired, angry, bored. Sometimes they wish things were different. Sometimes they wish they were different, but even their wishing shapes the world. One rainy evening, you pass a widow on the bridge. She's reading a letter by lamplight. Her hands tremble. Her mouth is set. You catch only a few words. "My darling." And something about a boat. She folds the page, tucks it into her coat, and stares at the river. You nod. She does not nod back. But you both understand, because beneath every bonnet in London is a mind at work, a heart carrying names, a story not yet told, and if the city stands tomorrow, it will be because of them. London sleeps, not all at once, not like the countryside where stillness spreads like ink across a clean page. No, London resists sleep, resents it even. She puts it off, muttering through gas lamps, shifting in her sheets of brick and fog. But eventually, inevitably, she yields. The streets, once crowded, thin like tea poured too long. Doors click shut, curtains are drawn, the glow of windows fade, one by one, like candles bowing out in reverence to night. You watch it happen from your window. It begins with sound. The vendors quiet first. No more calls for pies or chestnuts. The markets fold into themselves, stalls becoming skeletons in the dark. A last cart rumbles by, slower than it began. Hooves echo longer now, like time is stretching. Then come the lights. The lamplighters have done their work. Flame stands at attention in glass cages along the road. But even they seem to dim as the hour leans toward stillness. Your own candle dances quietly. You do not blow it out just yet. Sleep in London is layered. Not just the closing of eyes, but the settling of centuries. Beneath your room, the floor remembers footsteps. The bed remembers dreams. The walls, they carry sighs. And the city itself? It breathes slower. You imagine the rooftops exhaling, the chimneys cooling like weary throats. You think of the river, rolling gently now, like a lullaby too old to sing, but too familiar to forget. Somewhere, a nurse finishes her rounds and leans on a railing, eyes closed. A baker, too tired to undress, rests beside the oven's hum. A constable tips his hat to the fog and says a prayer only the mist can hear. Even the rats walk softer. You sip the last of your tea. The cup is chipped, but the warmth remains. There is comfort in that. Imperfection held gently, and now in the dark you remember not everything but the important things. The way the fog felt against your collar that first day. The scent of violets and coal smoke. The letter you never sent. The boy with the charcoal drawing. The woman on the bridge. You remember Miss Heddle's quiet kindness. Eliot's strange laughter. The whispering books. The cellars. The rooftops. The fogged windows. The ghosts. You remember that even in noise the city had music. Even in cold it had fire. Even in loneliness it had tea. This is what London is, and always will be. Not just a place of smoke and sorrow, but a city that dreams. With you, around you, and through you. You rise slowly. The candle is low. The bed waits. Outside the fog thickens but no longer hides. Now it hushes. And just before you lie down you look once more from the window. The street is empty, but not alone. There is something eternal in its quiet. Not silence, not absence, but presence. History curled gently beside the present, both asleep now, breathing in rhythm. You blow out the candle. The dark is soft, and in that dark, London dreams. Of footsteps past, of chimneys and violets, of crows and letters and hands held just long, enough, and you, drifting now, are part of that dream. You have walked its alleys. You have touched its walls. You have learned its breath. And now, at last, you rest. London sleeps, and so do you. Good night.